afternoon, evening, time zones. Hi, fellowship. Let me get to this. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Welcome in. Oh. Sorry, got a little pop-up. Well met, Andrew. Kelly waves frantically. That's the kind of energy I like to see on a Monday. I hope your weekends and your week. Arkaby came in with the melon drop. I'm sure it's not pronounced melon like the fruit. Probably more like meloin. That sounds like my loin. Can't be that either. We'll get there. Because if someone puts the pronunciation in chat, I'll do my best. Martin, hello. Hi. Hi. Welcome on in. Indeed, that these few chapters we read this week were dramatic. Yeah? We can all agree on that, I imagine. Dramatic, well, I guess I was gonna say in the right way, but not really. Not really in the right way. Let's go. Evening. Before we get started, a little piece of housekeeping just to get it out of the way. So we're finishing the book next, and that's technically 4 chapters. It's chapters 7 through 10, which is just about the same amount of pages we read this week. So hoping that's fine. However, I'm not able to meet on Monday. So was thinking we would do it this Sunday at 2 p.m. Central Time. I changed that on YouTube. But if there are strong opinions to just pause a week and pick up the week after, we can do that. You guys let me know. I will. Otherwise, we will go on Sunday. But happy book club day today. Nothing's changed. We are here. This camera seems really high. Give me 1 second. Wanted to feel like we're together, not I guess felt so far away. But hi. This is so just a quick little recap on what we read again. Chapter wise, we read chapters 4 through 6. Started with A Journey in the Dark, right? Oh my god, why can't I find this chapter break? You're getting closed captions on the stream? Yes. Yes, I've put those there. You have no strong opinions about anything? Yes, the auto closed captions were put there for me for accessibility while we live stream. No, A Journey in the Dark was not the first chapter. That's chapter... No, that's chapter 4. Okay, A Journey in the Dark. Followed by A Bridge of Khazad-dûm. And then we ended today with Lothlorien. So, let's do a quick recap of these chapters, and then, and by quick, I probably don't mean quick at all. I don't imagine, nothing is ever as quick as it seems, which, speaking of not as quick as it seems, this mother frickin' journey, around every corner, there was something against us. You were stunned the first time you read this story through Moria? Yeah. It's a lot, right? Like you can do Sunday, but missing a week to the following Monday would be more convenient. Okay. Yeah. I feel bad because we took a week off a couple weeks ago. But it is kind of the end, and we might, because it's the end of the book, it might be worth it to do like a deep dive into the whole thing too. So do like an hour or so of like recap of the ending we may need like an hour and a half, and then just like an hour or so to like talk about the entire book as it stands, before we get into Two Towers. That's a good thought. Okay. I'll circle back to that scheduling with you guys. So keep an eye on, if you're in the Discord, keep an eye on the Discord. If you aren't in the Discord, keep an eye on the community section. And also, yeah, community section and Discord is usually where I post the most stuff about book club. Moria is such an epic location, and the build up to the bridge scene is indeed iconic. You didn't write the thing because it matters for the book club, just in general. Thank you, Kelly. When I first read it, I was worried that it was gonna be part of next week, but now that you've said it's not necessarily like ever in the book, you're totally good. Her decision is very different in the book than in the movies. Oh, interesting. We haven't had a lot of Arwen. We get like a mention of Arwen at the end of today's reading, but other than that, we only know Arwen as in she is related to Elrond and was in Rivendell. We have like we know like the family tree and whatnot. Okay. However, let's start with the journey in the dark. So we pick back up on our journey. We've turned around from the snowy mountains that is one of many deterrents in our journey thus far. And I think that even as reading this, and knowing like where the movie pauses, this was kind of where I was like, there's no way. I was reminded that like we don't get a true ending, right? We don't get a true, and to be fair, as Tolkien has said in his intention for these books, it's meant to be one big book that's just split up to be easier, essentially, to be sold and maybe read. Hi, Dylan. Arwen plays a very different role in the books than in the film, so it makes sense. Okay, yeah, and thank you for that. So, where was I? Ooh, I lost my train of thought. That's okay. We'll find a new one. Just as if we're Gandalf taking us through Moria. Okay, so we're turned around. We have to go through. We had mentioned in the previous section that we read, Gandalf and Aragorn had been talking about a different way we could have gone that neither of them really wanted to take, but it seemed sketchier, it seemed darker, it seemed more dangerous. However, we're very quickly turned away from the mountainside through the snow, and it's very clear that this is not just like a freak snowstorm or just like a bad snowstorm we've stumbled upon. It is very much a power, an entity bigger than us that is turning us away, that's telling us that we're not allowed and we're not invited and we're not safe on those lands. Oh yeah, I was talking about how we're wondering how you're going to reach the end of the Fellowship film in time of how little the book is left, which reminded you, it's just, yeah, it's all just really one novel. But like when you're reading this and it's your first time reading it, even though I have the knowledge of the films behind me, which, by the way, for anyone that is waiting on it or is wondering, the words, hold on. Oh, the SAG-AFTRA has met with the AIM PTP today, so I'm hoping we'll get good news on that and we can officially release Return of the King for you guys, my reaction to that movie, if anyone in this chat has been waiting on that. I know we get a little bit of crossover, though not full crossover. Okay, so there's in A Journey in the Dark, when we first get into this, let's just get back into going through the book. So we're in A Journey in the Dark, we're going the second way. There's a lot of buildup of tension. There's also a lot of foreshadowing. There's mention of, at certain points, there's mention of trusting and following Gandalf while we have him. And that's a little bit further into the chapter, though. So we're talking about this option of this choice, this different path we can take, which both Aragorn and Gandalf have a lot of pause about. That it's not a path taken lightly. But to go back, but they do have this moment, which I think is nice, where they have this conversation about what it would mean to turn around, what it would mean to admit defeat now. And to go back is to admit defeat and face worse defeat to come. If we go back now, then the ring must remain there. We shall not be able to set out again. Then sooner or later Rivendell will be besieged, and after a brief and bitter time it will be destroyed. So while the 9 of us might be safe for now, if we turned around and we went back to Rivendell, it would only, the inevitable would continue to happen. The ring cannot be hidden in Rivendell, and so if the ring cannot be taken to Mordor, then to turn around would be full of shame, essentially. And it's a, what I love about Gandalf and what I love about the character creation there, and what I love about the writing of this, is that it's not ever, they give space for these conversations that I think, like, they're very, I'll say, human in nature, that stem from little bits of fear, where we want to turn around, we want to give up when the things get tough, or not necessarily give up when the things get tough, but like we consider, are the safer options better? And oftentimes, ring aside, sitting in that option of safety is more detrimental in the long term, no matter what. You're holding yourself back in a lot of ways. Now, that's to say, like, in our day-to-day life, right, choosing the option of safety while safe can have a lot of different types and kinds of effects on you as a human. In the discussion whether they say they should go through the mines, Boromir says, or we might pass by and cross the Isen into Langstrand and Lebanon, and so come to Gondor from the regions nigh to the sea. You hope I'm using my maps. I need to go to an entire college for cartography with the maps in these books. I think Khazad-dûm is much grander in the book. Fair, and that's a fair notation, Kelly. My fears for you, Aragorn to Gandalf, Moria. Yes, thank you. Yeah, because so they decide Gandalf tells the group that the roads that he speaks of leads to the mines of Moria. And Gimli, this is where we find out, Gimli lifts his head up and we learn that Moria, well, and there may have been mention of Moria before, but my brain, if it's not, at this point, my brain is not like necessarily like pinpointing any mention of Moria before, though I imagine the way Tolkien writes, there absolutely were mentions of it, and the dwarves. So, but this is where it's like very blatantly clear. We're going to Moria. Moria was built by the dwarves. So it's very personal for Gimli. And so Gandalf kind of takes Gimli in and says, you are going to join me in leading the group. Which we come to find out, Gimli doesn't necessarily have much to add in the terms of leading the group. He's never been to Moria. He doesn't know anything. There's been little to no tale. He's really most excited to find out if, was it Balin? Is that the name? Is there? Another dwarf. He's looking for the lore, the history, what happened to someone that he knew, or someone that he knew. So there's really no other option. It's this or they turn back. And we've discussed that turning back is not necessarily, while it's an option, it's not necessarily a real option. It's kind of like the coward's way out, but even then it's like So we could not go, we could all not go, and then we're just bringing doom upon to everyone that we love and the places that we love. Like Sauron, the ring had been lying low. As Gandalf said, the ring now wants to be found. There is nowhere that the ring could have been hidden that it would not have been found. Exactly. And that's why we can't go back. We have to move forward, which that's a lot of what life is moving forward. So they have to go under versus going over or around, and going under opens up a lot of door for danger. But it's also possible that it's the path that the enemy will expect the least. So there's like this little, there's a lot of tension building in this chapter, but there's also these like little glimmers of like, but maybe everything will be fine, right? It's really tense, it could be really dangerous, but like maybe everything will be fine. And Gandalf kind of manipulates Gimli into going, so there's a Gandalf more or less gives people the choice. Balin, yes, one of the dwarves from The Hobbit, and you think the second most developed dwarf character in The Hobbit. Oh, interesting, and that's good lore to know. Thank you, Michael. So that's who Gimli wants to find news of. So, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know that it's necessarily rough to say Gandalf manipulates Gimli, but he kind of manipulates Gimli because Gandalf goes, there's even a chance that dwarves are there. And so then Gimli goes, and I will tread the path with you, while the rest of the group is like, actually, we don't want to go. Pippin and Merry say they don't want to go. Even Frodo says he doesn't want to go. It's Gimli and Aragorn say they wish to go. Aragorn specifically says, you followed my lead almost to disaster in the snow, and have said no word of blame. I will follow your lead now, if this last warning does not move you. It is not of the ring, nor of us others I am thinking of now, but of you, Gandalf. And I say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware. And there we get a little bit of foreshadowing, which it's kind of interesting. Reading it in this moment, it kind of gives me this interesting, like, what does Aragorn know that we don't, or that Gandalf doesn't? And I don't know if Aragorn really knows anything, or he just fears. Like, it's a dangerous place, and Aragorn knows that. Because Aragorn and Gandalf have both been to the mines. This is not new territory for them, but it has been a while for both of them. And so even Frodo says he wishes not to go, but neither does he wish to refuse the advice of Gandalf. So they come to this conclusion. They're like, okay, let's take a nap. Instead of making a decision right now, we need to rest. Let's eat, let's take a nap. But then there's this howling. There's this wind picks up. And this wind almost feels like a character in and of itself, the way that it's described. They heard the wind hissing among the rocks and trees, and there was a howling and wailing around them in the empty spaces of the night. So, rest we will not. Aragorn leaps to his feet. How the wind howls, he cried. It is howling with wolf voices. The wargs have come west of the mountains. So this is our first, let's call it, hurdle of the chapter. The wolves. And Aragorn has journeyed the north for decades and heard rumors. He knows Gandalf will have to expend all his powers for Moria. Oh, okay. Thank you. I always understood that Aragorn had a dark foreboding on his heart, but could not have known the details of the journey in the dark. These are great points. Foresight is a curse. You know what happens, but if you warn them, something even worse happens. The butterfly effect, yeah. I mean, not necessarily the butterfly effect, but kind of. Sam, whatever may be in store for old Gandalf, I'll wager it isn't a wolf's belly. Even Sam feels something. Gosh. It's interesting. This chapter, I mean, very specifically in these chapters, we learn a little bit more of like Frodo's ability to sense things, but I feel like this entire group is very wise and can feel even in like their silly moments or in their moments of fear or in their moments that appear to be more selfish in nature than others, they're a very wise group that at the end of the day they just want to do the right thing, and they want to do it as safely as possible. But this journey is anything but safe. So we find out that there's these wolves hunting us, and we get an immediate sense of urgency and a sense of tension, enough to fill multiple humans into whatever their remedy for anxiety and fear is, whether you're fight, flight, or freeze. And we start to see everyone kind of spiral a little bit. Even Pip is saying he wishes he would have taken Elrond's advice and not joined the group. Which I do appreciate, seeing this fear as kind of, actually, I won't say I didn't feel that the fear or the anxiety that the group was feeling felt overburdened, like felt burdensome. In the past, when Sam had gotten like anxious and it was like deterring the group from being able to do things, I got a little frustrated with Sam's anxiety in moments. But here, in these moments, I'm not feeling that. I'm feeling grateful that I'm seeing like the anxiety and the tension that the writing has built in me is being mirrored back to me. Because it would almost be weird if like everyone was like, fine, it's fine, everything's fine, we're gonna be good, we're the fellowship, we're the company, or it's getting serious. Yes, thank you, it's getting serious, and it feels serious, and it's reflected back in the characters' fear and lines and voices that it is serious and it feels serious to them. There's a trope in Icelandic sagas that some people have foresight and can predict things, but not the specifics of how it'll happen. Tolkien is taking up that trope here. So I think that's a trope we see in definitely a lot of literature, movies, stories. Another example of this is Gandalf saying he thinks Gollum will have some part to play. Yeah. Yeah, it's also like, that's also a very common writing technique of foreshadowing. Though I did find myself wondering, because this book is so old, I wonder what the like discussion around writing was at the time. Because like my knowledge of writing and literature is like that there's like different ways to tell a story. Like you add in foreshadowing, you add in like hints within color, or like symbolism of like nature around you. So like often I'm looking for moments of like flowers blossoming or little things like that that add like a little bit of symbolism to the moment. But I don't know, writing and literature and those things, that art form changes, evolves over time. So I did find myself wondering, with a book this aged, what were those conversations? Although I say it's aged, but like 70 something years is still not really that old, by any means. So the wolves are on our tail. We decide we have to kind of like bunker down. And the wolves do attack, which I was actually surprised, because this almost feels like lackluster in how it happens. We see a pair of shining eyes, and Gandalf stands up, strides forward, holding his staff aloft. "Listen, Hound of Sauron," he cried. "Gandalf is here. Fly if you value your foul skin. I will shrivel you from tail to snout if you come within this ring." The wolf snarled and sprang toward them with a great leap. At that moment, there was a sharp twang. Legolas has loosed his bow. So we see that wolf fall, and all the other wolves retreat. Hi, James. I'm good. How are you? It's clear Moria will be their next great challenge and inflection point in this story, both in modern writing styles and epic styles. Yes, Eric, agreed. So then Gandalf and Legolas take down this wolf that was about to attack us, or I mean, did attack. It just didn't hurt anyone. and everything goes silent. The rest of the pack retreats, everything goes silent. And for a moment, I thought when I was reading this, my experience was like, we're safe. It's good. We're safe. We're fine. Everything's going to be okay. But no, because wargs had gathered silently and they started attacking. But instead of one animal this time, which I'm not exactly sure what a warg is. When I first read that, I read that as a warthog. Like in my mind, I pictured a warthog, but I'm not entirely sure what a warg is. The wolf scene to me shows that average threats won't end the fellowship. I like that. I kind of took it as like a yes, that, and then also just like as more and more and more started to attack us, I took it as kind of like this is not going to be easy. Like we've chosen the hard route, but even like getting to the harder route is going to be difficult. In ancient days, Sauron was called the Lord of Werewolves. It gets worse every time. Exactly, John. That's how I was feeling. I think this is different from the author foreshadowing because it's a character telling the other characters. Fair. So back to the Icelandic Icelandic trope. Trope might be the wrong word, but I'm not saying Icelandic trope. A warg is more or less a large wolf, somewhat more intelligent than the wild variety. Okay, thank you. Thank you. So everyone draws their blades, they all start fighting these wargs. And it's funny, well, it's not funny. This was kind of terrifying to me because it was like what I imagined. To be fair, when I first read this, I imagined that what we were fighting were warthogs. And I was like, that's interesting. But larger wolves makes way more sense for the display of power we had to do. Because then I was like, this is a huge display of power where we were able to just get one wolf and take it down and the rest retreated. We have this entire show. Gandalf tells everyone to pull out their weapons, including the hobbits. He says, Gandalf to the hobbits, draw your blades and stand back to back. And then Gandalf says a phrase that I won't even try to butcher right now. It says his voice rolled like thunder, which is a phenomenal description. I love the descriptive writing that Tolkien uses to describe things sound. Because I really do think it makes it, I almost like feel the vibration of the sound, so to say. There was a roar and a crackle, and the tree above him burst into a leaf and bloom of blinding flame. The fire leapt from treetop to treetop. The whole hill was crowned with a dazzling light. The swords and knives of the defenders shone and flickered. The last arrow of Legolas kindled in the air as it flew and plunged burning into the heart of a great wolf chieftain. All the others fled. So we have this huge display of power and this huge, what I imagine is a warning to everyone else watching and considering attacking is like, don't do it unless you're really prepared, and don't come for this group of people, this group of travelers, unless you're prepared for the fight of your lives. Is kind of how it feels, right? It's like they made a huge display of it. And I would think that we know that Gandalf doesn't intentionally like bring attention to the group unless he has purpose for it. What did I tell you, Mr. Pippin? Wolves won't get him. Yep. Yep. Wolves won't get him. That was an eye-opener and no mistake. Nearly singed the hair off my head. That's what Sam says. The wargs also appear in the earlier story of Bilbo, but only east of the Misty Mountains. The wargs in the Two Towers movie are like rhino-sized hyenas with no brains. But you didn't get that from the book. Fair. Yeah, okay, yes, and I'm remembering now what the wargs look like in that movie. That's the ones that take down Aragon or take him over the cliff. Yes. Those are big, terrifying animals. No brains though. Yeah, I didn't. Again, I didn't realize until this moment that, because I literally wrote a big show for just hogs. Hogs almost got us. I really thought it was warthogs. It's fine. That's how my brain will take one word and turn it into two, apparently. Actually, I know this about my brain, and that's okay. That's okay. We see things differently with different light. So Gandalf says, "These were not ordinary wolves. We need to eat quickly, and we need to go." So this is a paragraph within still A Journey in the Dark, and this was, I noted that it's just very obvious and very potent that there's very big evil at play in the air around us, and everyone needs to be ready to fight at any moment on this journey right now. So Gandalf tells us to eat quickly and go. That day the weather changed again, almost as if it was at the command of some power that had no longer any use for snow, since they had retreated from the pass, a power that wished now to have a clear light in which things that moved in the wild could be seen from far away. The wind had been turning through north to northwest during the night, and now it failed. The clouds vanished southwards, and the sky was opened, high and blue. As they stood upon the hillside ready to depart, a pale sunlight gleamed over the mountain tops. Which is it's a bone-chilling description of the evil in the air around them, because we know that Sauron has many spies, and also like a clear sky and sunlight just means like they'll know which way they're going so they can prepare. Hi Khalid, welcome in. Cassie see me. I don't even know how to say those words. I'm so sorry. Is that Spanish? Is that something Sam says? Okay, moving on. So there's a lot of tension building. We're making our way. So Gandalf and Gimli are walking together as we're going to Moria. We get to this stream that Gandalf has been looking for, but there's no water in this stream anymore, which is odd. We make note of. Gandalf says it used to be swift and noisy, but so we have to continue going. We've at least found where the stream was once upon a time, even if there is no longer a stream, which we'll find out where that stream is in a second. They get to so they get to some sort of door at first, right, or area, and come to find out that this was not where your book is in Spanish. Okay, thank you. I was like, wait a second. But thank you. I know a little bit of Spanish, but not enough to fully understand in this context. Okay, so we find out that the valley had been dammed, which is why the stream didn't have any water in it. So it's a very ominous finding, and then we realize we have to go a different way. And also this is where we first discussed that we're going to let Bill loose, which isn't necessarily like a huge thing, just like also sad, because we've talked about Bill and Sam's beautiful relationship, and their like kinship between Sam and the horse Bill is very very sweet and very lovely to see. So we get to this area with this water. Oh, hold on. And this is where we start to see Frodo's, what shall I call it? His foresight, his senses. We realize that he has this new keen sense. And maybe we don't realize that right now in this moment it's a new keen sense. But we've seen all along that Frodo has this ability to like sense the world around him in a different way, but he now has an even keener sense of this, and his foot steps into this water and he feels this he shudders with disgust when it touches it. And Sam throws a rock into it, and there came a soft sound, a swish, followed by a plop, as if a fish had disturbed the still surface of the water. And the way that this is all written is so it's written in a way that's very easy to overlook if you're just like, okay, why are they making such a big deal about this water that is like everyone else thinks is fine, but Frodo is just like freaking out about. But we're starting to see Frodo's ability to sense danger around him in a different way. And we get to what we know as the door here. Oh, thank you, Carlos. Welcome in. And we get to the door, and the door, there's writing on this door to Moria in both Elvish and in Dwarven. And we continue to see this tainted history between the dwarves and the elves. And I noted here that the long and salty history between elves and dwarves could be a problem if not managed, because when this comes up, Gimli and Legolas always tend to like make little snide remarks to each other, which is not like neither of them have had personal moments of this. It's just like passed down distaste for this other being, this other race, essentially, this other race. And Gandalf goes, I beg you two, Legolas and Gimli, at least to be friends and to help me. I need you both. The doors are shut and hidden, and the sooner we find them, the better. Night is at hand. And it's funny that he asks them to be friends, because then, after what feels like an eternity, it's not even... Is it? Hold on. No, it's actually, okay, it's a few more pages than I would have imagined. So they sit outside and they discuss a couple of things, and Gandalf is trying to figure out how to open this door. He's unsure how to open the door, and everyone around him is actually kind of starting to freak out, or like trying to like ask him questions, and he is getting, his temperament seems to be getting more stern and short, because he keeps kind of like biting back at people, actually, and not in like the hardest way we've ever seen Gandalf bite back, but he's kind of like, I kind of took it as, have you ever been in a really stressful moment and your friends keep trying to like give you advice that's in no way helpful, and it's like they mean well, right? The people around you mean well by trying to give advice, but it's like you don't need advice in some moments, you just need like a moment to kind of get some clarity and figure it out. And that's what Gandalf needed, and that's what Gandalf wasn't getting from his friends. But he carries on. He asks for a moment of silence. He finally says to Peregrine, to Pip, he says, knock on the doors with your head, Peregrine took, but if that does not shatter them, and I am allowed a little peace from the foolish questions, I will seek for opening the door. So Gandalf continues, and then finally he has his aha moment. Do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. Yes. For Legolas and Gimli, the dislike between the two races is both inherited and personal. For example, Legolas's father imprisoned Gimli's father 60 years earlier. But see, when I say personal, I mean like they themselves haven't had interactions of negative. It's like for them, for Gimli and Legolas, it's passed down distaste, dislike. Like you could say a personal and to an extent that it was Legolas's father that imprisoned Gimli's father. Like that's closer, but like it's still not like firsthand experience is kind of what I mean. It's definitely closer than years and years, but it's still not firsthand experience, you know. So they before even getting out of Rivendell, they kind of made a decision that they disliked each other because of the experiences of their family, which I'm not saying isn't fair to an extent, but it should be noted that it, if not managed, it could get out of hand and cause some issues within the whole group, was more so the point I was getting at. So Boromir throws, wait. Okay, so Boromir also throws a stone into the water, which Sam had done earlier, remember? And Frodo then speaks up and says, "Why did you do that, Boromir? I hate this place too, and I am afraid. I don't know of what, nor not of wolves or the dark behind the doors, but of something else. I am afraid of the pool. Don't disturb it." Right after that, Gandalf has his aha moment, and he speaks the Elvish word for friend, which is melon. It looks like melon with two L's, so I don't know how to say it. But I'm doing my best. And so like I had mentioned, he'd asked Gimli and Legolas to be friendly to each other, which also on the door, it's literally written in Elven and Dwarven writing. All the writing on the door. So that opens the door, which is just in time because it is the most dramatic melon. Thank you. It's so dramatic. Well, and it needs to be because as the door opens and at the same time, well, let me just read it as it is. He strode forward and set his foot on the lowest step. But at that moment, several things happened. Frodo felt something seize him by an ankle, and he fell with a cry. Bill the pony gave a wild neigh of fear and turned tail and dashed away along the lakeside into the darkness. Sam leaped after him, and then hearing Frodo's cry, he ran back again, weeping and cursing. Poor Sam. The others swung round and saw the waters of the lake seething, as if a host of snakes were swimming up from the southern end. So Sam's able to slash at the snake or tentacle thing with a knife, breaks it loose. He's grabbing Frodo, pulling him away, and then 20 of their arms come rippling out of the water, which is absolutely terrifying and such a vivid display of danger. So once again, we've had the wolves, we've had the wargs, and now we have this 20-arm, 21-arm tentacle thing in the water, which even Gandalf is like, I am unsure if that is one thing or many things, but what I do know is that we need to keep moving. And so they do. But not before the arms come in and close the door behind them and then essentially block that entrance and or exit. That door is now no longer available to them. It's been closed, and I believe that like rocks have, it seems as if it was kind of like loosely written in here that the passage was now no longer an option to them. And this is where you know for sure that there's so many things against the Fellowship, and it's like maybe everything is being managed by Sauron. One would assume that it's just this like spreading of evil that has reached some of the deepest, darkest corners of Middle Earth. its fingered end had hold of Frodo's foot and was dragging him into the water. You can see this in the film. You can see fingers on the end of the tentacles in the film. Ugh. It gives me shivers. Poor old Bill, wolves and snakes, but the snakes were too much for him. I had to choose, Mr. Frodo. I had to come with you. Sam does run after Bill at first, but then he hears Frodo and he runs back, and he does save Frodo. In the end, Bill would have had to go away anyway, so it was the right decision. In my opinion, it was really the only decision, but, you know. That's my opinion. So but all in all, we're in Moria. Great. This should be easy, right? Should be so easy. So like I said, Gimli and Gandalf are leading the way. Gimli's really adding nothing. Gandalf's making all of the decisions, but Gimli, it even says, the minds of Moria were vast and intricate, beyond the imagination of Gimli, Gloin's son, dwarf of the mountain race though he was. Which, I don't really even know if Gandalf necessarily thought Gimli would have insight. It seemed just as likely that Gandalf would choose to pull Gimli to the front as a sign of respect that they're entering dwarven land, a historic dwarven space. That's kind of my own opinion, though. Gandalf is very wise. Even though he didn't know the way, I don't think he was under any illusion that Gimli would know the way, having never been there. Although, you never know, with the lore and the history passed down. To me, the evil of the Watcher was not Sauron's evil, but deeper. Fair. Yeah. Honestly. Yeah, it felt and all that to say, like, it's wherever the evil was coming from, it's a great representation that the evil spread really deeply, even if not necessarily directly from Sauron. Gandalf thinks he did not speak aloud his thought that whatever it was dwelt in the lake, it had seized on Frodo first among all the company. It seemed pointed for sure. Yeah, Moria's easy. The tricky part is finding the doors. Gandalf brought Gimli forward more for morale purposes than for actual aid. That's not to say that I think Gimli is useful in some cases, but Gandalf was keeping spirits up. Yes, Gandalf is incredibly wise, and in that wise nature, he's not only wise in like knowing things, but he's wise in how he treats the people around him and how he sets expectations and how he speaks to people and how he's very direct and meaningful in pretty much everything that he does. Although we do get to see like a more stressed out version of Gandalf in the readings that we did this week, but we'll get to that in a second. There are fouler creatures in the depths of the world, which is terrifying because the Watcher is very scary already. There's an ancient, powerful evil lurking in the depths of Moria. Yep, yes, there is. And so we start getting in there. We're making our way. Aragorn has a moment with the group. Do not be afraid, said Aragorn. Do not be afraid. I have been with him on many journeys, if never on one so dark. And there are tales in Rivendell of greater deeds of his than any that I have ever seen. He will not go astray. If there is any path to find, he has led us in here against our fears, but he will lead us out again at whatever cost to himself. So again, we see this moment of foreshadowing of sorts, or foresight, that this journey might come down to the life of Gandalf. However, we have to keep moving on. Frodo and Gandalf say they feel this certainty of evil ahead and evil following. I believe that this is Frodo that feels this. Yes. This is where we get this understanding that Frodo is hearing also the footsteps behind him. And ever since he was stabbed, he feels more keenly this sense of danger around him. And also, he can see better in the dark. So this stab that was supposed to turn him evil is aiding him in a couple of ways that are allowing him to have this leg up, so to say. Almost like there's still these little effects within him, but he didn't turn evil. Hopefully. Aragorn of Gandalf. He is surer of finding the way home in a blind night than the cast of Queen. Bruthiel, reference to deeper historical stories. Aragorn, one thing Aragorn will always do is speak highly of Gandalf, but also he'll be a little sassy. Those little lines from Tolkien are awesome. Agreed. The ring is definitely not good luck. It definitely doesn't seem so. So we see, carrying on, we see them rest, we see them move on. All in all, things are mostly okay. We get to, where is it that we get a lot of like moments of like seeing the fellowship interact, or the company as they call it more so, and they go about 15 miles. Then they have this then we get a little bit of lore about where we are. So the whole, there's notice or note of all these holes around them, and Gimli says those are not holes. This is the great realm and city of Dworodelf, and of old it was not darksome but full of light and splendor, and still is remembered in our songs. And then we get Gimli's song, which we'll read. I wonder whether this sense of evil ahead and behind is more related to the ring than to the injury, but I concur that the stab wound accounts for the vision in the dark. I took it not necessarily to, oh, well, they do, it's very, they say it very specifically that in, I don't know where it was. It's so, though he had been healed in Rivendell of the knife stroke, that grim wound had not been without effect. His senses were sharper and more aware of things that could not be seen. It was specifically said that it was from the knife, at least how I read it. But I do wonder, the ring has to have some effect as well. But I think it might be a little column A, a little column B. The evil of Moria is not connected to the ring. The ring definitely has an air of power around it, so. Well, no, we're not saying that the evil of Moria is connected to the ring from like the forging of it, but the ring giving like a sense of the ring having this power that gives Frodo like an extra sensibility, which the book, there is like a very specific line like I just read that says it does come from the knife wound, but I do think that it wouldn't be a wild idea to think that the ring also gives some sort of ability to sense more deeply. Pippin's well where he drops a stone is not in Balin's tomb. Yeah, yes, Andrew, you're right. In the book, it's 2 different locations. So we get Gimli's, yes, so we're sleeping on the first night. This is not Balin's tomb, but this is, I believe, where, is this where? Doesn't really matter. We're gonna read Gimli's song. So this gives us a little more understanding of Moria. The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone, when Durian woke and walked alone. He named the nameless, hills and dells, he drank from yet untasted wells. He stopped and looked in Mirromere, and saw a crown of stars appear, as gems upon a silver thread, above the shadows of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings in Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond. The western seas have passed away, the world was fair in Durin's day. A king he was, on a carven throne, and many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor, and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon and shining lamps of crystals hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, there shone forever, fair and bright. Their hammer on the anvil smote, their chisel clove and graver wrote, their forged was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mined, the mason built. Their beryl, pearl, and opal pale, and metal rout like fish's mail, buckler and corselet, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in hoard. Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountains music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrel sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. The world is gray, the mountains old, the forge's fire is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls, the darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria, in Khazad-dûm. But still the sunken stars appear, in dark and windless Mirror. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. Little dwarven history for us. The world was young, the mountains green. Thank you for reading it. When I read it in the book, I hear the BBC Gimli actor reciting the poem. I still haven't listened to that. I shall. Likely when... Maybe I'll once we finish this first book, I'll go through it. I've not wanted to spoil the reading of the book, and I've not been able to sit down and read at the same time. Though I have often wanted to listen to the book as try to like multitask, but I know that would be a disservice to myself and to y'all if I were to just listen to the audiobook without the book in front of me. No multitasking for me when I do these readings. Oh, yes, Sam. Okay, yes, I love that Sam was so eager. He said, I like that. I should like to learn it. In Moria and Khazad-dûm. But then he goes, but it makes the darkness seem heavier, thinking of all those lamps. Are there piles of jewels and gold lying about here still? We learn, no, there's not. For sure the orcs have often plundered Moria. There's nothing left in the upper halls, and no one, not even the orcs, would dare go down into the evils that are below. And so then Sam asks, well, then why would the dwarves want to come back? And the answer is for Mithril. And we learn more about the shirt that Frodo is wearing. And Frodo through this entire thing stays silent, but we do learn that Gandalf knows that Bilbo has a shirt of Mithril and that it was a kingly present, is how it was described. A kingly gift. And Gandalf goes, I never told him, but its worth was greater than the value of the whole Shire and everything in it. So Frodo says nothing. I'm always struck by the abrupt changes from the world was young and the world is gray. The sadness in the shift from bright times to gloominess hurts every time. Yeah. The darkness dwells in Durin's halls. The shadows lie upon his tomb. In Moria and Khazad-dûm. But it does, the song does end hopeful, right? But still the sunken stars appear in dark and windless Mirror. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep. This, and we're coming to the end of A Journey in the Dark. So we learn of the Mithril, we learn more about Moria, we learn more about Durin, we get to see Gandalf and Gimli leading the way. We get into Moria, of course. That's kind of more or less where this journey starts. A Journey in the Dark was getting into Moria. We not by ease did we get into Moria. Many things were against us. And as we get to a point where there seems to be a bit of relief. Gandalf for a lot of the journey through Moria didn't really know where we were. He, as someone who had been to Moria before, he could not remember. He could not remember the pathway, but he was going with his instincts. He was going with his deep, wise senses, even at once choosing a path that, like, he didn't choose one path because he didn't like the smell of it. It smelled like evil. So much did happen in this chapter, yes. It was kind of a long chapter, yeah, comparatively. And we wake up and And there's this moment of relief because Gandalf finally knows where we are. For morning, so we wake up, Frodo sits up. "Good morning," said Gandalf, "for morning is again at last. I was right, you see. We are high up on the east side of Moria. Before today is over, we ought to find the great gates and the waters of Mirror lying in the Dimrill Dale before us." We continue on, and that's when we find, like was mentioned just a moment ago, in the movie, where the well is and the tomb is one location. But in the book, those are two different locations, two different stops along this journey, which it does in the book show like how long and grueling this journey is, because it was, I believe it was said to be like 40 miles as the crow flies, I believe. So many more than that. I think it was said to be 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 spurts of walking, which, as we more or less know, even though the hobbits need more rest than maybe other people in the group, they really make you walk until the hobbits are about to faint. We've seen that time and time again. So they find themselves in this wide corridor. They look to the side and they see this door that's dazzlingly, and inside it seemed dazzlingly bright, and they blinked as they entered. They go in and they find the tomb of Balin, son of Fundin, Lord of Moria. And this was who Gimli had been wanting to find news about, or had been hoping, honestly had been hoping he was alive. And we see in the last chapter, or last sentence of this chapter, "He's dead then," said Frodo. "I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. So Gimli goes into this kind of like moment. You can tell he's more or less distraught. Oh, yes. And I'm just double checking on some of the comments that were made. So yes, dog, we did, or dag, sorry, I flipped the W and the G. I did indeed read Gimli's poem. And we will also read the Elvish song when we get to it as well, or poem, hymn, in the final chapter that we go over today. Those passages can really make you feel how horribly everything is going for the poor dwarves down in the deeps. Yes. Dag says Tolkien would have made a good horror writer as well. What do you guys think? I think so. He's very good. I think some of my favorite moments of his writing are his tension building and like weaving in moments of relief, or almost like gaslighting us into thinking like maybe everything will be fine. And then the tension building, and then the moments of sometimes the moments, like the big moments, don't play out as dramatically in my head as I think they're meant to. But I think part of that is today because the tension building is so intense that sometimes we get to a moment that I think is meant to be kind of like a trick moment, and I'm like, oh, that all that tension just for, well, warthogs that now I know are not warthogs, but the last line is the one Gandalf reads. Not in my version. There's a line under that in my version. We have what Gandalf reads, and then Frodo says, "He is dead then. I feared it was so." Gimli cast his hood over his face. We might have different versions, though. I'm reading, I think, the 50th anniversary. Far bigger than Minas Tirith, and with many levels. So many levels. So many. Possible to translate these runes from the character tables? There's character tables? I don't know that my appendix is, I only have maps. only have maps. Okay, so let me scroll through this real quick. So, Nick, let's talk about before we move on to the second chapter, the password simply being friend, spoken in the language of the elves. Nick said, I find it profoundly sad to see how the relationship between elves and dwarves have deteriorated over the ages of Middle-earth. We explore that relationship a bit more in these chapters when the Fellowship meets Haldir in chapter 6. Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And then a few quotes in this chapter given to us by Nick. Aragorn defends Gandalf while the Fellowship anxiously travels through the mines. We read this, but we'll read it again to really hone it in. Do not be afraid, said Aragorn. I have been with him on many a journey, if never on one so dark, and there are tales of Rivendell of greater deeds of this than any that I have seen. He will not go astray. If there is any path to find, he has led us here against our fear, but he will lead us out again, at whatever cost to himself. Appendix is at the end of the third book. That makes so much sense. I've been looking for it because there's a little asterisk sometimes, and I'm like, where is the appendix? That makes sense. We've touched on everything I wanted to say about this chapter. You can skip me for now. Okay, are you sure? Okay. From Tolkien's Forward, in spite of the darkness of the next 5 years, World War II, I found that the story could not now be wholly abandoned, and I plodded on, mostly by night, till I stood by Balin's tomb in Moria. There I halted for a long while. Interesting. It's almost, knowing that, being reminded of that, it's interesting to know that he didn't end this book there. But that makes sense. It wouldn't have been a very good ending. Although I don't know the ending of this book, truly. How it's written, at least. It depends on the elvish tribes. Some are more friendly toward dwarves. They are. And that's true. But there's a history overall. A larger history. Dwarves v. elves, unfortunately. We can give that a little more time too when we get to chapter 6. One more quote. Gandalf explains the value of history of Mithril. The dwarves tell no tale, but even as Mithril was the foundation of their wealth, so also it was their destruction. They delved too greedily and too deep, and disturbed that from which they fled, Durin's bane. Of what they brought to light, the orcs have gathered nearly all, and given it in tribute to Sauron, who covets it. Yes, I actually forgot to go over that because, apologies, this coffee is hitting me. Knowing that Sauron has like loads of Mithril, and then seeing how great Mithril can be in chapter 5, doesn't feel like a great sign, right? He wrote that to his publisher. I can only imagine his what the fuck face reading it. He asked when the book is finished. Yeah, I'm sure. I imagine, with all due respect, Tolkien sounds like he was a handful to manage from an editing perspective. And I mean that with like the utmost respect. I think he just, he is a great writer, and he didn't let editors edit his book into the ground. And now we have the greatness that we have today. So there's something to be said for it. But I do just imagine that his editor would go home and have many glasses of whiskey or whatever, smoke or whatever his source of release was. Yes. Okay. Okay. I love when we read wild stuff, so I'm feeling a sad hole in my heart, but that's okay. I mean, I got to read it today, and it was wonderful again. Wild. Thank you again. I wanted to make sure I'm not just like always stealing your words, so I was like, we'll go through it this way today. I wholeheartedly agree. I would have hated, yeah, I would hate to be his editor. Absolutely. Love reading his books. Would have hated to be his editor. Chapter 5, though, is oddly enough the shortest chapter we read today, but is the most pivotal, one of the most pivotal chapters I think, will ever read. There is a quote when an editor told him, "You can't phrase this that way. Tolkien proof of English language. Rumors are the editor did that only once." Yeah. Yep. The proofreaders kept changing his spellings. Yeah, that part is so interesting to me. You can read it if you want to. We just hit everything in that chapter. Okay, if we skip something I want to touch in later chapters, I'll call it out. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Just know that I appreciate you and I don't want everything you wrote in there to go to vain. But let's get into chapter 5 because we've got a lot to. This chapter packs a big punch in very few pages. We pick back up in the tomb of Balin and we find this book and we're reading. The book is very damaged, but it is for better or worse, it is the record of the fortune of Balin's folk. So it begins with their coming to Dimmeril Dale. And then it talks about driving out orcs from the gate and guard and mirror. And we can only read a little bit because the book is burnt and the book is dirty and the book has been through a lot. And then it says, Balin has set up his seat in the chamber of Mazarbul. So we can assume that's where we are. The chamber of records. And then Gandalf says he can't really read anymore, but he does see and read that Balin is now the Lord of Moria, and then another hand begins, and the last two lines say, Oin to seek for the upper armories of Third Deep, something go westwards a blur to Holland's Gate. The reading of this book was striking this fear in my heart because it felt very rushed and feverish in the writing of it, as if like the group was like sitting around this book trying very hard to figure out the little things that it said and what they could glean from it. But like, I don't know if I was just reading it fast or if it was written in this like, I think maybe I was stressed. I don't know if that was written, if it was written that way, if I was just feeling that. So then we find a new handwriting, because this book, there are many different many different people wrote the history into this book. And then we find one it says a large bold hand using an elvish script, and Gimli says that's Ori's hand. He could write well and speedily and often use the elvish characters. And that's where we get ill tidings. From this portion in the book, we see that Balin, Lord of Moria, fell in Dimmeril Dale. He went alone to look in Mirror. An orc shot him from behind a stone. And that is the fate of Balin. At the time, the editors, especially in the US, wanted it written dwarves, but Tolkien insisted on dwarves, and now everyone uses Tolkien's version everywhere. Tolkien made a copy of these pages. They are in the BTS book. Oh. Maybe it's because lots of the other parts are rather slow and depictive, and now the pace is picking up a lot. Yeah, I think so, Kelly. I think, yeah. The choice to tell us the story of the dwarves' expedition to Moria through the eyes of their writing of their I don't know how to say that word correctly without it sounding like something else, so I'm just going to call it writing, which I assume is what that means more or less. And a rough and damaged book is incredible. It adds to the reader's apprehension. Yes, yeah. The way that part is told through the writing of that book, which we can't read a ton of, is a lovely way to tell the fate of a character we were looking for. I mentioned Ori and Oin were both companions of Bilbo and the Hobbit. Oh. I feel for Gimli here because he seems very sad, and it is a very grim reading. And this is where it gets kind of scary. We cannot get out. They have taken the bridge and second hall. Frar and Loni and Nolly fell there. Then there are 4 lines smeared so that I can only read. Went 5 days ago. The last line runs, the pool is up to the wall at Westgate. The watcher in the water took Oin. We could not get out. The end comes, and then drums. Drums in the deep. I wonder what that means. The last thing written is a trailing scrawl of elf letters. They are coming. There is nothing more. Gandalf paused and stood in silent thought. Annals, a record of events year by year. Thank you. I've never seen that word before. Learn something new every day. You were in total awe when Gandalf read the book. You were there? Say more. By the way, Ori would be the dwarf skeleton in the movie. Ah, okay, thank you. Oin was Gimli's uncle, the brother of Gimli's father, Glóin. Oh, okay. Thank you for the history on Ori and Oin. I do appreciate it, always. So we read this, and I specifically wanted to read out that portion of the fear, the drumming. We cannot get out, because that really struck a fear in me, and I wrote, I can feel the fear leaping off of the page. It's a writing of a depiction of someone reading a writing, a written depiction of someone reading a writing, and I felt the fear so deeply in that moment. It felt like I was there, and then moments later, we decide we need to go out, we need to leave, right? Gandalf had hardly spoken these words when there came a great noise, a rolling boom. And this is where everything starts to get absolutely terrifying and incredibly fast-paced, and now we're hitting the ground running. We hear this great horn, and we hear this hurrying sound of many feet. And then Gimli says, "We cannot get out," which we just read. Those are the words we just read as we were reading from the book. We cannot get out. So it's like so quickly mirroring the fortune of not only Balin, but the dwarves that once hailed these halls. And it strikes this bone-chilling fear, because that could be our future. That could be our fate, right? And like when you're reading a book like this and you see, okay, well, it could be our fate. Well, we know there's 3 total books, but who's to say that we don't all just die and that's the end of it? It's a very tragic tale. Gandalf says, "Trapped. Why did I delay? Here we are, caught just as they were before. But I was not here then. We will see what." And then more dooms come down. Doom, doom came the drumbeat, and the walls shook. And so we have this conversation. Do we slam the doors? Do we wedge them? Well, there's another door. We shouldn't cut off that door, because if we cut off the east door, then we won't have a chance to get out, and we need that way as an exit plan. But then Gandalf says, "Don't close it. Don't close it." Who comes? And Gandalf loudly yells, using his loud voice, which we know is a very boomy, terrifying voice, from the pit of his toes. "Who comes hither to disturb the rest of Balin, Lord of Moria?" And he's met with laughter, which can only be the most terrifying and disrespectful response I could imagine. Remember, this didn't come out as 3 books. It came out as 1 book at a time, that you had to wait months for the next book. Correct. True. Yeah, but it wasn't. But I imagine that they knew that there were 3 books in total, because I know that Tolkien didn't. What are the words for this? Tolkien doesn't want this seen as 3 books. He wants it seen as 1 book broken up into 3 parts. So I don't think he released the first book, if my memory serves, until the whole thing was complete. So like, yes, it was released like that, but I imagine people knew that there were more. Well, I don't know the marketing plan though. So that all is fair in love and publishing. So they say. Anyway, so they're met with laughter. But yes, to be fair, I do have the fortune or the misfortune of hindsight and knowledge and the films, but I try to keep that in mind when I read and point that out, because I do think that there are moments where I'm biased in my perception of things because of my understanding of different things. These orcs are upon us, and they don't care at all about Gandalf. They don't care at all about they're hungry. They're hungry, they're thirsty, they're coming for blood. All Is Fair in Love and Publishing was way funnier to me than it should have been. Thank you for enjoying that. Thank you. That was a nice little bit I threw in there for you guys. Okay, so the orcs start attacking, and Boromir leaps forward. Suddenly, to his own surprise, Frodo felt a hot wrath blaze up in his heart. "The Shire," he cried, and springing beside Boromir, he stooped and stabbed with Sting at the hideous foot. So he kills just by hitting it in the foot with this very powerful knife that we have. He kills an orc. And I love that Aragorn celebrates this. "One for the Shire," cried Aragorn. "The hobbit's bite is deep. You have a good blade, Frodo, son of Drogo." And I just love that, because it's like, even in this moment of fighting, of intense battle, there's this celebration and this moment of like shock that, you know, a hobbit can do what a hobbit can do, or the hobbits are doing what they're doing. They're stepping up in different ways. Juice, hello. Paris, getting technical about the author's intention. Tolkien wanted it published as one volume holding 6 books, but post World War II, that was way too expensive. Yes, thank you for that insight. Yeah, I remember reading about that because I took time to read the notes on the text and the prologue and the foreword of this specific edition that I'm reading, and learned a lot, though there's always more to learn about Tolkien. I find. Okay, so Frodo comes through, kills an orc, right? And they all together they kill 13 orcs. And then once at the 13th kill, the rest of them fled, shrieking. And everyone was unharmed except for Sam, who had a scratch along his scalp. So Gandalf is like, "All right, we have to go before the trolls return." Because we know, I believe it was in this moment. Was it before this or is it after this? Gandalf uses his light. Maybe he doesn't. No, he does. He uses his light to look out the door. There's orcs, there's cave trolls, more than one cave trolls. So it was like a bleak sight that he saw. So once they get the 13 down and the rest retreat, he's like, "We need to get the heck out of here." So they start to retreat. Before they can reach the stairs, a huge orc leaps into the chamber. And this is where things get a little more dastardly, because I'll just read it as it is. Diving under Aragorn's blow with the speed of a striking snake, he charged into the company and thrust with his spear straight at Frodo. Very direct attack right to Frodo. The blow caught him on his right side, and Frodo was hurled against the wall and pinned. Sam, with a cry, hacked at the spear shaft, and it broke. But even as the orc flung down the truncheon and swept out the scimitar, Anduril came down upon his helm. There was a flash-like flame, and the helm burst asunder. The orc fell with cloven head. And then now shouted Gandalf, "Now is the last chance. Run for it." Aragorn picked up Frodo where he lay by the wall and made for the stair. So it's interesting because this part where Frodo gets hurt is so it didn't I've read this so many times because I was like, is it the hindsight knowing that Frodo is alive, or was it purposeful writing that was like, you know what, I'm not even gonna try to gaslight you into thinking that Frodo's dead. I'm gonna let the company think Frodo's dead, but I'm not gonna make you, the reader, think Frodo's dead. Why am I wasting your time on that? He's not dead. He's the main character of these books. You should, Sirens. We have a great time. I hope you're doing well. Also, hello. Hello, Siren. Um we're next week, or potentially the week after, we're finishing Fellowship of the Ring, and then we're starting Two Towers, which would be a great time to start up with us if you'd like. It was all written, but there was no social media, so who knows what you'd have thought if you had read The Hobbit as a kid and seen the sequel in a bookstore. Yes, Michael, yeah, that's fair. Especially like 70 or 80 years ago. Of Sam, a fire was smoldering in his brown eyes that would have made Ted Sandyman step backwards if he had seen it. Every single person in the company and the Fellowship came through in that battle. You can't say a single person didn't put their all into it. So we pick up Frodo, and then Frodo speaks, and Aragorn nearly dropped him in his amazement. I thought you were dead. And they just have to keep moving. There can be no pause to discuss this, to discuss that we thought Frodo was dead. We have to keep moving. Because we're still not done with this chapter, and this chapter is short, and there's a very big thing. So we're running away. Gandalf says, you guys need to go. The tension is so high here. I was like reading feverishly. It's like, you have to go. Frodo could be dead, and it's on the reader to remember that Bilbo gave him his Mithril mail shirt so that he should be alive. Yes. Yeah. But I don't know. I never got any moment of like, it happened all so quickly. Like, you get told here, you can't see it, it's blurred, but like in the bottom fourth of one page, and then in the top fourth of the next page, you realize he's alive. So like, we didn't even have, there wasn't like a lot of like stress or tension around it. It was a quick turnaround of like, maybe he's hurt. Is he even hurt? He's passed out. Aragorn has to carry him. Oh, but he's alive. But yeah, it happened really quickly. But I can't help but think that it probably was like a decision not to like pretend. And I think I'm biased because in the movies, it's very much like a huge tension moment of like, Frodo is dead. Frodo can't die. Frodo's dead. And then the reveal of the Mithril shirt. So, okay. So Gandalf sends the rest onward, and then we're down a little bit of ways, and we can hear that Gandalf is fighting. We see a bright light, and then all of a sudden, Gandalf comes tumbling down the stairs. And he just goes, well, that's over. An immediate, I was like, that's so very nonchalant of Gandalf. But then he goes, I have done all that I could, but I have met my match and have nearly been destroyed. And he continues on, but don't stand here, go on. You will have to do without light for a while. I am rather shaken. Which, this is one of the first times we see this like shaken, I don't want to say weak side of Gandalf, but he's been weakened. And that's fair and true. We continue on our way. We have to. We know that there is something, even that we hear no sounds of pursuit, but I feel there was this fear. I don't know if they ever mentioned this fear, but I felt this fear in the way that all of this was written. It felt very like tense. And finally we hear from Gandalf, or Gandalf says, I hope it is not far. I am very weary. I must rest here a moment, even if all the orcs have spawned are after us. Even if all the orcs ever spawned are after us, which that is such a telling thing that like even Gandalf, who in this great moment of fear, he's like, I absolutely cannot continue to go on right now. I must rest. Write about the difference in emphasis between books and movies about whether the tension is building, while both involve great tension and running in the Moria sequence. Yeah. Yeah. It's and I appreciate it both ways because I think it plays out the way that it should in both. Um, I think in the movies it makes more sense to have that like bigger tension around Frodo and you're given that space because you can play with time and space a little differently than in the book. And in the book it's like we have to keep going, like we can't have this like huge tension moment of pause. Because it feels not necessarily like pause in the movies. It doesn't feel like, oh no, you're choosing death if you pause here to check on Frodo. That's a really rushed way of formulating my thoughts, but there's a little appetizer of that thought for you. Gandalf says, I have found myself suddenly faced by something that I have not met before. I could think of nothing to do but try and put a shutting spell on the door. And so Gandalf chooses to shut this door, and then he hears the orcs on the other side talking about gash, which is the word for fire. And he felt it through the door, and he can also feel that the orcs themselves were afraid and fell silent. And he also says, what it was, I cannot guess, but I have never felt such a challenge. And then the door burst into pieces. Something dark as a cloud was blocking out all the light inside, and that's when Gandalf was thrown down the stairs. And he also notes that the room itself kind of collapsed in on itself, so then they cannot, which is just another way of saying like that way is no longer open to us. We have to go this new way, this new probably longer way. Balrog equals Aldano de Durin. Ooh, that's what it is in Spanish. Again, you're right. Both are effective, even though they handle it differently. Yeah, and there's really, there's no right or wrongs in perception of things. Well, there can be right or wrongs for sure, but art is meant to be experienced and felt, and if you guys ever feel something differently, just know that like that's totally okay. That's absolutely okay. We take this little moment to catch up, and we talk about we check in with Frodo, and even Gandalf is like, I did think that you were dead. And Aragorn says, I can only say that hobbits are made of stuff so tough that I have never met the like of it. Had I known, I would have spoken softer at the inn in Bree. The spear thrust would have skewed a wild boar. Frodo goes, well, it did not skewer me, I'm glad to say, said Frodo, though I feel as if I had been caught between a hammer and an anvil. He said no more. He found breathing painful. And Gandalf says, you take after Bilbo. There is more about you that meets the eye. As I said of him long ago, Frodo wondered if the remark meant more than it said. Durin's Bane. It's the name of the Balrog, yes. Thank you. Okay, so we continue on, knowing now that there's something bigger and darker and more evil amongst us than orcs, and coming for us than orcs. And I wrote orcs, trolls, and something mysterious. Oh my. Because at the time when Gandalf is telling us this, I don't know necessarily that we'd called it a Balrog yet, but on literally the next page it says a Balrog. Yeah. So the Balrog finds us. So we find that the path that we took actually helped us, because there was this fire that, had we gone the original way, we would have been caught by. We're able to kind of bypass the fire. We get around. The orcs are caught by the fire, so they're halted. And this is such a beautiful moment because I love the way this is written. Legolas turned and set an arrow to the string, though it was a long shot for his small bow. He drew, but his hand fell and the arrow slipped to the ground. He gave a cry of dismay and fear. And it was not the trolls that filled the elf with terror. The ranks of the orcs had opened, and they crowded away, as if they themselves were afraid. Something was coming up behind them. While it could not be seen, what it was could not be seen. It was like a great shadow, in the middle of which was a dark form, a man shape maybe, yet greater, and a power and terror seemed to be in it and to go before it. You know, and that's the Balrog. That's Durin's Bane. And Gandalf's response is, "What an evil fortune, and I am already weary," which is absolutely terrifying and awful, because Gandalf up to this point has been kind of like quite literally our shining light, our guiding light through this entire journey, in his words and his actions and his managing of the entire group, and literally with his light at times. Legolas is the first to name it, and his understandable terror. Again, I love, 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 love the doom, doom, doom drum beats that Tolkien uses. Yes. The drumming, I think Tolkien has a phenomenal ability of weaving sound into these stories in a way that ignites fear, or deepens whatever emotion he's trying to build up, which is phenomenal, because like so often you have five senses in the real world, right? And it's not every writer can bring in moments of each sense into a book. Gandalf desperately needed a recharge. Yeah, so we know Gandalf is weak, but we have to go. And Gandalf tells us to go over the bridge, cried Gandalf, recalling his strength. Fly, there is a foe beyond any of you. I must hold the narrow way. Fly. So no one heeds this command. At least Aragorn and Boromir kind of stand by Gandalf's sides, and the others halt just within the doorway at the hall's end. The Balrog reaches the bridge, and this is probably, the iconic moment from the movie. Gandalf stands firm on the bridge as the Balrog is raising its whip, and the thongs whined and cracked. Fire came from its nostrils, and Gandalf says, "You cannot pass." Interesting to note. I believe that in the movies, I know in the movies it is "you shall not pass," which I believe the actor took upon himself to change the line. And it does feel, "you shall not pass" does feel kind of better. So, I hate to say it. Sorry, Tolkien. I like "you shall not pass." "You cannot pass" doesn't seem as like powerful. But it is. Gandalf is a powerful man, a powerful, wise wizard. "You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Udun, go back to the shadow. You cannot pass." So we see this standoff between the Balrog and Gandalf, and Aragorn and Boromir are like, "We are gonna go in." They yell for Elendil and for Gondor, and they start leaping after Gandalf. This is when Gandalf lifts his staff, and crying aloud, he's smote the bridge before him. The staff broke asunder and fell from his hand. A blinding sheet of white flame sprang up. The bridge cracked. Right at the Balrog's feet it broke, and the stone upon with it stood crashed into the gulf, while the rest remained, poisoned, quivering, like a tongue of rock thrust out into emptiness. With a terrible cry, the Balrog fell forward, and its shadow plunged down and vanished. But even as it fell, it swung its whip, and the thongs lashed and curled about the wizard's knees, dragging him to the brink. He staggered and fell, grasped vainly at the stone, and slid into the abyss. "Fly, you fools," he said, and was gone. The fires went out, and blank darkness fell. It's so stirring He says both in the film. Yeah, you are right. And this is where Aragorn springs into action. Aragorn springs into action as the leader. Come, I will lead you now, he called. We must obey his last command. Follow me. Which I think is like, Gandalf and Aragorn had such a strong relationship. No one else would have been able to step into this position more so than Aragorn, in my opinion, because Aragorn went into this knowing and having that respect from Gandalf that if this moment ever were to happen, Aragorn would have to step up and step in and carry on this journey. And he does, and everyone's crying as they go, and they take this moment, they get somewhere to rest, and they just have this moment to like all cry. Some standing, some laying down, some walking around, but they all have this moment of grief. It happened much faster in the book than in the movie. Yeah, I agree. I know that this moment is heavily foreshadowed, but it also feels like it comes out of nowhere at the same time. Yes, yeah. Agreed. It's kind of like, it's one of those things where you see this powerful wizard and you think there's no way he can get taken down. But he did it so that we could all get out. The rest of the company, the rest of the fellowship could get out. Sauron is probably the most powerful of all the Mayor. Yeah, well, he is known to be a more powerful wizard, yeah. There's actually a Wikipedia article on the They Shall Not Pass because it was a slogan of French soldiers in World War I when the Germans were trying to capture French defenses. Oh. Doom. Oh, yeah, let's get back. Yeah. Frodo heard Sam at his side weeping, and then he found that he himself was weeping as he ran. Doom, doom, doom. The drum beats rolled behind, mournful now and slow. Doom. They looked back. Dark yawned the archway of the gates. Under the mountain shadow, faint and far beneath the earth, rolled the slow drum beats. Doom. Grief at last wholly overcame them, and they wept long, some standing in silence, some cast upon the ground. Doom, doom. The drum beats faded. Okay, let's check in on the community section real quick. See what little lovely quotes we have from Nick. Wild, if you do you want me to read anything from yours? Okay. Okay, so in this chapter split, this is from Nick's comment in the community section. In this chapter split, we lose an essential member of the fellowship, seemingly forever. The reader can sense the morale change and the hopelessness of the quest take hold as soon as they are no longer with us. Let us always remember Bill the Pony, the unofficial 10th member of the fellowship, who heroically ventured from Bree all the way to the walls of Moria before turning back when attacked by the creature of the lake. Bill was a hero. We needed Bill. And then I love how they wrote Bill out of it. They were like, Bill can't come into this, but like he needs a farewell that is worthy of Bill. And he got it, I think. Okay, and then for quotes, after Frodo survives the spear thrust, Gandalf says, "You take after Bilbo. There is more about you than meets the eye. And I said of him long ago." Frodo wondered if the remark meant more than it said. I do think that remark for sure meant more than it said, because Gandalf has so much appreciation for Bilbo and for Frodo. But saying that Frodo takes after Bilbo, I feel like is a very high regard. You would draw attention to Gandalf's threats against the Balrog. Okay, hold on, I'll get up to it. Let me read this last quote from the chapter from Nick. Okay, Gandalf at the bridge of Khazad-dûm. "You cannot pass," he said. The orcs stood still, and dead silence fell. "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame." Oh, this is kind of it. The orcs stood still, and dead silence fell. "I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor. You cannot pass. The dark fire will not avail you. Flame of Udin. Go back to the shadow you cannot pass. That is the quote. Then we can take a moment to go back up here to what Wilde wrote. The fight on the bridge comes. Gandalf describes himself as a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Anor, and declares that the dark fire will not avail his foe. What any of that means we can only guess, but it is clear that those are very real threats that Gandalf makes. Gandalf achieves a Pyrrhic victory, and Aragorn immediately assumes command. No time is taken to process or grieve. This highlights something grim in Aragorn's character and something dire about their situation. Oh, you think that highlights something grim in Aragorn's character? I took it as like he was the hero we needed and he stepped in. But interesting to see that it could highlight something lesser within him as well. But you are so right in calling out that the threats that Gandalf sends to the Barlog they don't make a ton of sense, right? To us, they're just words, but they're very powerful words. And we know that Gandalf does very little by mistake. So for him to use these words it did seemingly halt the Balrog, right? And then Gandalf was able to crush the bridge and send the Balrog down. Unfortunately, he also took himself down in that same way. He didn't take himself down, but he was taken down at the same time, unfortunately. And it's bleak. It's our leader is suddenly and so quickly gone in a way that in such a quick and chilling way. I've only read the books once myself, but I listen to the audiobooks on YouTube at night sometimes, but I usually fall asleep after a few chapters. Is it your comfort, Toodle? I can see it being like a comfort listen. It's nice to fall asleep to something you know, because then they are similar in power, the Balrog and Gandalf. And you know what, Carlos? That's a great call out, because they held their own. And it wasn't until the crackling of the bridge that the Balrog fell. So really it wasn't necessarily Gandalf took the Balrog out by breaking something that was weaker than himself, the bridge. Not by necessarily taking the Balrog down himself. Well, we won't talk about what happens later yet. Those are Tolkien's cosmological, theological references in Gandalf's speech. The explanation comes in the Silmarillion and other books. The secret fire is the fire of Eru, Ilúvatar's creative force. See, and this is something that's so beautiful and deep about Tolkien's writing. And Nick says this in his last little bit of topics and themes to discuss, that through everything that we read today, the lore and whatnot, Middle Earth feels very alive and real. And again, I will hound this in. You can say so many things about Tolkien's writing. It's dense, it's long, but it's everything. It's so researched. It's written like it's real. And that's what makes it feel real. And that's what makes it easy to sink into. Yes, it's dense. Yes, it can be wordy. Yes, it can be long and spirally and whatnot, but it's a huge story. It's a huge journey, and it deserves the length that it is. It deserves the moments to sink into the big moments and into the small moments, because that is, I think, what makes it feel real and alive, versus just like something you can, versus a world that you read and then you go, okay, and you never go back to. Like there are so many great fictional worlds out there that you only need to experience once, or you may only want to experience once. And Middle Earth is not one of those worlds, in my opinion. It's soothing. If it's not Lord of the Ring, it's Harry Potter, because they're both familiar to listen to. You can't sleep without background talking. Your TV used to stay on all the time for the same reason. Gotta have those friendly, they're like, it's like friends. It's like having friends in the room. I totally get that. All right, let's end with chapter 6. We'll try not to go more than like 30 more minutes, because these streams really get to my my voice. I won't lie. Okay, so we get out. We're heartbroken. We're grieving, right? We've left Moria. I want to call it Moira, but it's Moria. All right. Aragorn again is leading us in this way. Farewell, Gandalf, he cried. Did I not say to you, if you pass the doors of Moria, beware? Alas, that I spoke true. What hope have we without you? He turned to the company. We must do without hope. So, I think unless, oh, well, before I think, because I think some of this we can kind of like breeze over, but we're leaving, and as we're leaving, we're passing Miromir, which you may recall from Gimli's hymn, and we see Durin's stone, and Gimli asks for a moment with the Dale, with the stone, with the Miromir, and Aragorn gives him this moment, but tells him to be swift, and Gimli asks for Frodo to come with him, so it's Sam, Frodo, and Gimli who go down. Beside the standing stone, Gimli halted and looked up. It was crackled and weather-worn, and the faint runes upon its side could not be read. The pillar marks the spot where Durin first looked in the Mirror, said the dwarf. Let us look ourselves once ere we go. They stooped over the dark water. At first they could see nothing, then slowly they saw forms of the encircling mountains, mirrored in a profound blue. And the peaks were like plumes of white flame above them. Beyond there was a space of sky. There, like jewels sunk in the deep, shone of glinting stars. Though sunlight was in the sky above, of their own stooping forms no shadow could be seen. There lies the crown of Durin. Till he wakes, farewell. Gimli bows, turns away, and hastens back up the road. And Pippin asks Sam what he sees, but Sam doesn't answer because he's too deep in thought to reply. You have a very different interpretation of the Flame of Anor, but that's neither here nor there. Another interpretation can be equally valid. Yes, that's absolutely true. And the Flame of Anor is Peer says, and the Flame of Anor is the life-giving fire of the sun, created from the last fruit of one of the 2 trees that had illuminated Aemon and Middle-earth before being poisoned by Morgoth. Yes, I hope to one day read the Silmarillion. It seems like a big journey. So I, knowing myself in the way that I do, I know that I would need reason to invest in that journey. And the reason would be like a love of Middle-earth and a love of the stories. I don't think, knowing what I know about the Silmarillion, it's definitely not something I could read without incentive I love lore, so I would need just the incentive of like deepening the lore for myself. You know what I mean? But I've heard great things, and I hope one day to get to it, for sure. Okay, but carrying back on, we're in chapter 6, Lothlorien. So we give Gimli this moment to pay his respects, and we carry on, and this is where Legolas says, we're coming upon the woods of Lothlorien, the fairest of all the dwellings of my people, Legolas says, so of the elves. They say the Silmarillion is more like reading a history book. Yeah, that's what I've heard. I do not want to poison others' thoughts, especially lives with my own thoughts just now. I was just drawing attention to the references because I think they're important. Thank you, Wild. Yeah, and that's fair. And thank you. Thank you. Like an elvish history textbook. That is what I've heard. And I think when I am like yeah, I'm definitely not like turning my nose up to it, but I know myself well enough to know that I would want to know certain things within it versus like everything in it being new to me. So, but I think the journey of Middle Earth and the journey of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits and Tolkien's other writings are, um, I don't think you can go wrong, you know? Do it in the way that approaches you, the journey that unfolds to you. For me, the journey that unfolded to me was starting with Lord of the Rings. A collection of encyclopedia articles and short stories. Each chapter is standalone. People who are expecting a novel are going to be very confused. That's honestly probably the least intimidating way it's ever been explained. All right, carrying on. So Frodo and Sam are hurt, and we take a moment to heal them, and Aragorn heals them, and it's very sweet. Aragorn helps Sam, checks out his wound. Luckily, there's no poison in the wound, and then this is where Frodo tries to deny being tended to, but Aragorn's not letting that happen, and that's when we find out that that's when everyone finds out that Frodo has the Mithril shirt, and everyone is everyone just kind of takes a moment to revel in that. And then Aragorn says, "The mail is marvelously light. Put it on again if you can bear it. My heart is glad to know that you have such a coat. Do not lay it aside, even in sleep, unless fortune brings you where you are safe for a while, and that will seldom chance while your quest lasts." So we're told, don't take it off. Okay, keep it on. So they continue on. Everyone's healed. They continue on. Frodo and Sam are feeling better, so they're able to keep up at a faster pace. But this is where the patter of feet that is following them returns, which to my knowledge, and so far I believe Frodo is the only one that is hearing the feet. And he does bring it up in this moment. He says, "I thought I heard feet and I thought I saw light like eyes. I've thought so often since we first entered Moria." Gimli halted and stooped to the ground. "I hear nothing but the night speech of plant and stone," he said. "Come, let us hurry. The others are out of sight." So Gimli takes a moment to listen but doesn't hear anything, and we carry on. At this point, I'm assuming very much that it's our dear friend whose name I will not let snake out of my mouth right now, but you know. So we get to the edge of Lothlorien, and we decide to take a moment to eat and rest, and Legolas sings us this song of the maiden Nimrodel, who bore the same name as the stream beside which she lived long ago, which it should be said, we pass over this stream, Nimrodel, and Legolas tells us, it says, "I'm going to put my feet in this because the water is healing to the weary." So Frodo gets in it, and he felt the stain of travel, and all weariness was washed from his limbs. Which, no spoilers, yeah, I'm like, okay, I can probably guess who this is, but, just in case anyone's lurking in here that is new to the story, I'm trying my best not to spoil it for anyone that is new. So, here it is. "An elven maid there was of old, a shining star by day. Her mantle white was hemmed with gold, her shoes of silver gray. A star was bound upon her brows, a light was on her hair, a sun upon the golden boughs, and Lorien the fair. Her hair was long, her limbs were white, and fair she was and free, and in the wind she went as light, a leaf of linden tree. Beside the falls of Nimrodel, by water clear and cool, her voice of falling silver fell into the shining pool. Where now she wanders none can tell, in sunlight or in shade, where lost of yore was Nimrodel, and in the mountain strayed. The elven ship in haven grey beneath the mountain lee awaited her for many a day beside the roaring sea. A wind by night in northern lands arose and loud it cried, and drove the ships from elven strands across the streaming tide. When dawn came dim, the land was lost, the mountains sinking gray, beyond the heaving waves that tossed their plumes of blinding spray. And wroth behold the fading shore, now low beyond the swell, and cursed the faithless ship that bore him far from Nimrodel. Of old he was an elven king, a lord of tree and glen, when golden were the bows in spring and fair Lothlorien. From helm to sea they saw him leap, as low as arrow from the string, and dive into the water deep, as mew upon the wing. The wind was in his flowing hair, the foam about him shone. Afar they saw him strong and fair, go riding like a swan. But far from the west has come no word, and on the hither shore no tiding elven folk have heard of Amroth evermore. Frodo is definitely the only one we know that has heard the footsteps at this point. I want to know, personal experience, personal opinion, Gimli's him and Legolas's him somewhat mirror each other, and like starting out light and ending kind of bleak. And also I think they are two of my favorites that we've read so far. But we carry on. So Legolas sings us this, but then he says, I cannot sing any more. This is but a part, for I have forgotten much. It is long and sad, for it tells how sorrow came upon Lothlorien, Lorien of the Blossom, when the dwarves awakened evil in the mountains. But the dwarves did not make the evil, said Gimli. I said not so, yet evil came, answered Legolas sadly. Then many of the elves of Nimrodel's kindred left their dwellings and departed, and she was lost far in the south, in the passes of the White Mountains, and she came not to the ship where Amroth, her lover, waited for her. And he goes on to say the theories of where Nimrodel could be and whatnot. And even in these latter days, dwelling in the trees might be thought safer than sitting on the ground. So there's one of the theories is that there's elves of Lorien that dwell in the trees, and Gimli's like, you know what, that might be safer than being on the ground. And Aragorn's like, actually, yes, your words bring good counsel. We cannot build a house, but tonight we will do as the Galadrim and seek refuge in the treetops if we can. So this is where they find a tree. We get to see this like beautiful writing of Legolas. And Tom and the Troll. Okay, that's a fun one. I did love Tom and the Troll. That's a good, it's like pitting children against each other, choosing a favorite child. How dare, how could. I love the descriptions though of Legolas like just traversing the earth. He sprang lightly up from the ground and caught a branch that grew from the trunk high above his head. But even as he swung there for a moment, a voice spoke suddenly from the tree shadow above him. And I for a second thought that we were meeting the tree, like the Ents, but no. Someone is calling down. There's an elf in the tree, and yes, they are elves, said Legolas, and they said that you breathe so loud they could shoot you in the dark. Sam hastily put his hand over his mouth, but they also say that you need not have fear. So the elves have been watching them, and they heard Legolas sing the song, and they could tell that Legolas was of their kind. And they invite Legolas and Frodo up to have a conversation with them. And we find out that there's 3 elves sitting in this tree. It's Haldir, Rumil, and Orofin. And they invite us to stay the night, but they nearly kick out Gimli. When they find that there's a dwarf amongst the company, they say you cannot have, this is not well. We have not had dealings with the dwarf since the dark days. They are not permitted in our land. I cannot allow him to pass. But he is from the Lonely Mountain, one of Dane's trusty people, and friendly to Elrond, said Frodo. Elrond himself chose him to be one of the companions, and he has been brave and faithful. So Frodo steps up for Gimli, and the elves in the trees decide, okay, the 4 hobbits will stay in this tree with us, and the rest will go on to another tree and stay there. And Legolas, you're in charge of them, especially that dwarf. Yes, and when they're climbing up the ladder, it is to be noted that behind came Sam, trying not to breathe loudly because the elves had told him he breathed loudly, which, poor Sam. Poor Sam. My favorite song is definitely the one Bilbo sings about Arendelle. Oh, I do love that one. But of these two, I'm always struck by the poetry in Gimli's song. I find it much more compelling than the story of Nimrodel. Yeah, the Nimrodel one is like feels more fanciful, but the dwarf one, Gimli's seems, I don't know. There's a little more heart in Gimli's. I will agree. Sam trailing Frodo is a big deal. Only Frodo. Yeah, you're right, and I did kind of breeze over that because only Frodo was invited, but Sam comes up, and not only is Sam coming up behind them, he's trying not to breathe heavily or loudly because he's already been told he breathes too loudly. So, but this is interesting because hobbits do not like heights and do not sleep upstairs. So the hobbits don't feel comfortable in this tree, and they're joking around, or not necessarily joking around, but they're kind of discussing it. And Pippin went on talking for a while. I hope if I do go to sleep in this bird loft that I shan't roll off. And Sam says, once I do go to sleep, I shall go on sleeping, whether I roll off or no. Sam. It's always going to be one of them. Always going to be Sam, Merry, or Pip making a joke, cracking a joke. Maybe not intentionally, but, a giggle here and there. So they do all fall asleep. Frodo wakes up, though, and he hears the sound of orcs coming. And none of the elves are in the tree. So the elves are keeping watch and keeping an eye on things. So they know that the orcs are there. And in this moment, we're obviously grateful we're not on the ground, because even though it's known that orcs are keen as hounds on the scent, and it is said that they could also climb. So Frodo draws out his sting, which is the sword that he has. It's small, but something I didn't say in chapter 4 is that, to note, when there are orcs nearby, the sword will glow. So Frodo pulls it out, and the sword flashes and glitters with a blue flame, and then it slowly fades again. But the feeling of danger doesn't leave Frodo. It actually grows stronger. And that's when he starts to hear something stealthily moving at the tree's foot. He looks down and he sees something climbing up, and then all of a sudden it leaves. He sees its eyes, and then it leaves. And then Haldir comes up and says, there was something in the tree that I have not seen before. It was not an orc. It fled as soon as I touched the tree. It seemed to be wary and to have some skills in trees, or I might have thought that it was one of you hobbits. But there was no attempt to shoot it because there were hundreds of orcs, and fighting the orcs would have been pretty deathly, very likely. The 3 of us could not challenge 100, so we went ahead and spoke with feigned voices, leading them on into the woods. And the elves are really powerful in that, like, we sense they have this entire system of safety set up. So already these elves are getting word out to other elves that there's orcs and that they need to be taken care of, and where they're going. But Hildir's like, you need to leave as soon as the sun is up. Like, as soon as there's light in the sky, we've got to be on the road. So they wake up and they get on the road, and actually Haldir and Rumil go with them. So they're guiding them down, and they're following the prints of the orcs' feet in the earth, but soon they cross this river, and it's really it's a really powerful river, right? And so we find out this really fascinating way that they cross it, which is just by like walking over ropes and rope walking. Because they're really light, elves are really light of feet and really nimble, so they're able to do this. But then Legolas is like, my friends can't get over the rope like this, so what are we gonna do? But have no fear, they had a way for everyone to get across. So they get across, and then we find out, or well, we knew that one of the conditions for Gimli being let in was that he must be blindfolded. But Gimli's like, I'm not going in blindfolded. I'm not evil. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I was assigned to this mission. This isn't fair. And Aragorn's like, okay, so now we're all going to be blindfolded. And after even some disagreement about that, that is the decision. Everyone is blindfolded and taken forward. Which is such a funny visual. And Haldir is talking to them along the way, and he's like, yeah, so yet so little faith and trust do we find now in the world beyond Lothlorien, unless maybe in Rivendell, that we dare not by our own trust endanger our land. We live now upon an island amid many perils, and our hands are more often upon the bowstring than upon the harp. Which means essentially, which is such a beautiful way of saying we're fighting and battle more than we're singing. The rivers long defend us, but they are a sure guard no more, for the shadow has crept northward all about us. Some speak of departing, yet for that it already seems too late. The mountains to the west are growing evil, to the east the lands are waste and full of Sauron's creatures, and it is rumored that we cannot now safely pass southward through Rohan, and the mouths of the great river are watched by the enemy. And this is such a jarring, I mean, it's stuff we know, but it's still such a jarring description of the evil that lays amongst all of Middle Earth in this moment. Haldir says, the world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater, which I loved. That's, I think, I just wrote a heart. I underlined that, I highlighted it, and then I drew a little heart. I loved that so much. So Hildur is telling us, like, well, as elves, we think we're probably just going to get kicked out of Middle Earth. Like, that's going to be the truce, is we're not going to be able to see the future of it. The shadows are continue to dwell over Middle Earth. So as we've talked about, Frodo has this deeper sense of feeling the world around him. Hold on. The elves called it a talon. We get a Middle Earth dictionary entry. Of course we do. Tolkien worked on. Yeah, he did. The hobbits accepted this second and far better supper very gladly. Of course they did. Of course they did. Yes, they got a supper in the trees. A plague on dwarves and their stiff necks, said Legolas. Now let us cry. A plague on the stiff necks of elves. Yeah, they had quite the little tussle of words over who was going to be blindfolded. I like that in the end everyone was blindfolded. It does seem like the fairest of all options, because someone said, I think Aragorn said, it is hard upon the dwarf to be thus singled out. And I think that's true, like to single him out as like, well, you're the only potential evil one. And it's like, come on. Elrond has approved him being here, right? Hobbits instinctively go to food for analogies. I feel like butter spread over too much bread. Elves go to music for analogies, bowstrings rather than harp strings. Ooh, I love that. Yes, and you're right. And it's so true. You hear the BBC radio incidental music as you read about them walking blindfolded through the forest. Yeah. Yes. I just think that this chapter is one of my favorites. It's so peaceful, but also like it's peaceful and restful, but it doesn't feel worthless. it feels like we're building a lot of momentum and we're like continuing our travels in the safest way possible. And it's, you know, it's very different from the first chapter we read where like everything that could go wrong was going wrong. It's like, okay, it almost feels like too safe, which normally I would say like after all the trauma, feeling too safe would cause fear in and of itself. But I don't know. There's something about these lands. And Frodo kind of feels it the best, right? In Rivendell, there was a memory of ancient things. In Lorien, the ancient things still lived on in the waking world. Evil has been seen and heard there. Sorrow had been known. The elves feared and distrusted the world outside. Wolves were howling on the wood's borders, but on the land of Lorien, no shadow lay. So it's this difference of Rivendell didn't have this feeling of pain or sorrow or battle within its grounds. And Lorien does have that, and so there's this fear, but there's no shadow. There's these protections set in place to protect the land and to kind of keep it secret and to make sure that everyone stays as safe as possible. But like the land of Lorien, there's no shadow. So they continue to march on, and they get to a place where we learn that the orcs had all been waylaid and almost destroyed, and the rest of the orcs that lived fled. But also that a strange creature had also been seen running with bent back and with hands near the ground, like a beast, and yet not of beast shape. But that beast of not beast shape got away. And then we find out that everyone can walk free, even the dwarf Gimli. So everyone is unbound from their visual restraints, and they're standing in this open space. To the left stood a great mount, covered with a sward of grass as green as springtime in the elder days. Upon it a double crown grew 2 circles of trees. The outer had bark of snowy white, and were leafless but beautiful in their shapely nakedness. The inner were malorn trees of great height, still arrayed in a pale gold, high amid the branches of a towering tree that stood in the center of all that gleamed a white fleet. I won't read the entire paragraph, but I just thought that the description of Lorien is so beautiful. And so we're invited to hold on. Is that where? No, okay. So Frodo is looking around, and from the very get-go, it's like the colors that he's seeing are more vibrant and more beautiful. And the way that this is described, he saw no color but those he knew, gold and white and blue and green, but they were fresh and poignant, as if he had at that moment first perceived them and made for them names new and wonderful. On the land of Lorien there was no stain. He says, I feel as if I was inside a song. There it is. If you take my meaning, Andrew, you and I are on the same page there. And Haldir says, we feel the power of the Lady of Galadrim. Would it please you to climb with me up Saren Amroth? Amroth, yes. So we make this little climb up, and they enter this circle of white trees. And again, there's another just like great description. Frodo touches a tree, and he says, never before had he been so suddenly and so keenly aware of the feel of texture of a tree's skin, and the life within it. He felt the delight in the wood and the touch of it, neither as a four-star nor as a carpenter. It was the delight of the living tree itself. It's such a beautiful, descriptive way of kind of giving us a feeling of being an elf, because I imagine that this is just like daily life for Legolas, as he just feels and sees the world so deeply and so beautifully. And I love that we get a chance to experience that as well. But the most important part is that we're shown and we see at first the southern Mirkwood, It is clad in the forest of dark fir, where the trees strive one against another, and their branches rot and wither. In the midst upon stony heights stands Dal Guldur, where long the hidden enemy had his dwelling. We fear that now it is inhabited again, and with power sevenfold. A black cloud lies often over it of late. In this high place you may see the two powers that are opposed one to another, and ever they strive now in thought, but whereas the light perceives the very heart of the darkness, its own secret has not been discovered. Not yet. He turned and climbed swiftly down, and they followed him. So that was from Haldir. So we see these two opposing powers, and it's just this like moment that I feel like we're reminded of the journey. In this chapter, that is mostly relief and safety and beauty. We get this like reminder, this visual and stark reminder that this shadow is coming over Middle-earth, and there's these opposing powers, and we need to get going. But first, we need to have a conversation, I think, in Lothlorien. However, that's pretty much the end of the chapter. Before we end this chapter, though, we get this moment with Aragorn, and he's standing still and silent as a tree, but in his hand was a small golden bloom of Eleanor, and a light was in his eyes. He was wrapped in some fair memory. For the grim years were removed from the face of Aragorn, and he seemed clothed in white. A young lord, tall and fair, and he spoke words in the elvish tongue to one who Frodo could not see. He was speaking to Arwen. Or was he speaking to Arwen? Yeah, here he says her name. He says, Arwen Venimelda Namri, he said, and then he drew a breath, and returning out of his thought, he looked at Frodo and smiled. Here is the heart of elvendom on earth, he said, and here my heart dwells ever. Unless there be a light beyond the dark roads that we still must tread, you and I, come with me. And taking Frodo's hand in his, he left the hill of Saren Amroth and came there never again as a living man. That final sentence is kind of makes me want to cry. It's so oddly beautiful, but also like it just feels like pain is coming for us all. And I fear it. I do. I do. All right, we've got two quotes from Nick. After the fall of Gandalf, Aragorn addresses the fellowship. Farewell, Gandalf. What hope have we without you? We must do without hope. At least we may yet be avenged. Let us gird ourselves and weep no more. Come, we have a long road and much to do. That's how we started. That's pretty much the first paragraph of Chapter 6. When Aragorn treats Frodo's wounds, gently he stripped off Frodo's old jacket and worn tunic and gave a gasp of wonder. Then he laughed. The silver corselet shimmered before his eyes, like the light upon a rippling sea. Carefully he took it off and held it up, and the gems on it glittered like stars, and the sound of the shaken rings was like the tinkle of rain in a pool. Look, my friends, he called, here's a pretty hobbit skin to wrap an elven princeling in. If it were known the hobbits had such hides, all the hunters of Middle-earth would be riding to the Shire. You can't end a chapter like that. My heart, I know. It's a chilling way to end our chapters. The thought of Aragorn no longer being alive is a lot. It's a lot to take in. Aragorn's bit about doing without hope is a huge deal. He's been nothing but encouraging from the start, teaching the hobbits to cling to hope when all else fades. Yeah. But even then, he encourages everyone to carry on without hope, and it just goes to show that like the happenings within Moria and Khazad-dûm were not easy. They were traumatic, and they were heartbreaking, and they were painful, and we lost one of our own. But we must go forward. We must carry on. And it's not easy to do so, especially when, how can you have hope in moments like that? You can maybe revive hope, sure. But in that moment, Aragon, I think, was swift and smart to say, we don't have hope, but we must carry on. Aragon's a bit, yeah. Any last little bits before we go today, my friends? We have gone longer than we've ever gone before, so we had a lot to go over today. I'm gonna put a poll in the community section. Let me just do it right now while I have you here. Just say book club date change. Please vote for Fellowship of the Ring chapters 7 through 10 and discussion date change. Would you rather Sunday? This Sunday, 10, 8, 2 p.m. or Monday, 10:16, 5 p.m. regular. And just a week later. Okay. Posting that. There, you read the bit that Haldir told Frodo at Saren Emerith about how the darkness is perceived by the light, but the light has yet to be found by it. Some secret power, yes. Legolas says something similar at the Eve of the Wood. Aragorn says to trust to the elves. Gimli doubts that there are still elves there. Legolas describes some secret power keeping it hidden. Ooh, yes. I did breeze over a lot of that power talk. It's a little mysterious. I wonder, I imagine we might get some answers in the next set of chapters, which we're reading 4 chapters. We're finishing Fellowship of the Ring in our next meeting. So we've got chapter 7, The Mirror of Galadriel. Chapter 8, Farewell to Lorien. Chapter 9, The Great River. And chapter 10, The Breaking of the Fellowship. Which I believe it's just, for me, I believe it's the same amount of pages we read this week, but it's just 4 chapters instead of 3. I hope we get to find out what that's about. Me as well. Okay, I put that poll in the community section, and then I'll update the YouTube live, and I'll update the event in Discord for it when I get an answer on that. I'll give everyone until like Wednesday, I think, to do it, and then I'll put a post up that says like what date we're rescheduling it for. So I would start reading now, but you may have an extra week to read, which wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing, to soak all that in. And then yeah, you know, we roll with the changes, and yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. We'll head out for the night. Thank you all. Rest your voice. Yeah, I'm gonna go get some tea. I will be investing in some tea tonight. Tea time. So thank you for being here tonight. I'll see you either Sunday or not this Monday, but the next Monday. Keep an eye out on Wednesday afternoon for an update on that. But I hope to see you around the internet before then. You can find me all the places. By now you may know where the links are. Just check the profile. Thank you, Nick. I know I really enjoyed the discussion tonight too. We really dug into it, maybe a little slower paced than usual. Vanimelda Namari. Beautiful and beloved lips, farewell. You guys are too good to me. All right, guys, goodbye. Thank you.